So the second thing you can do to deal with your fear is to erase your fear. Fear has a way of grabbing us and controlling us, but it doesn't have to be that way. I have to imagine that Daniel, Daniel in the Bible, he was probably afraid of lions. And we don't always think like that, but hungry lions he was afraid of. And I would say that is prudent to be afraid of lions. It's a rational fear. But he didn't let that rational fear usurp his trust and obedience to God. The book of Daniel is this whole long story of a man who journeys into a new culture, and that journey landed him in a lion's den. And there's a lot more there. There's a similar story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But in both those cases, they chose to face their fear, but erase its influence on their actions. They chose to be obedient to God, even when there was a fearful consequence for doing so. And things turned out well for Daniel, right? I mean, he survived the lion's den. But I have to imagine, even if things had not turned out well, even if he knew they wouldn't, I think he still would have made that choice to be obedient to God and to erase fear as a factor in that decision. We can be like Daniel. We can erase fear when we remember God's power and trust in God's goodness. Jesus knew that. He told his disciples that they'd soon be heading into an unknown time, a time where there'd be mourning, where they would be scattered and without their leader. But he reassured them with these words in John 16:33. This is what he said. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. That is good news. And Jesus says a few things here that I think are important. Just like the disciples, we too, in this world, will have trouble. In this world where all creation is affected by the reality of sin. We're going to get up close and personal with that trouble. And when we do, it sometimes has this way of kind of clouding. It fills our vision when we get so close, and it's all we see is that trouble that's in front of us. And I think it's important to zoom out a little, to look around, to see this bigger perspective and say, we need to remember that even though there's this trouble right here, that Jesus has overcome the trouble. Jesus overcome all the trouble that will ever come to you, all the trouble that has come, the things that you're dealing with now, all this stuff with the coronavirus, the hurt it's causing, the stress and anxiety. Jesus has overcome those things. He has won a victory over sin and death and all the things that come with it. And we need that bigger perspective. When we understand Jesus has already overcome those things, then we can begin to erase our fears. One last thing about erasing fears. Whenever I think about erasing things, I go back to grade school and I think of the first grade when I was working on learning to write the alphabet neatly. I remember specifically, I thought I'd be fancy and I'd write my A's like this, kind of a capital cursive A or something, very fancy. My teacher marked me wrong every time. An A goes like this. I figured it out eventually that she didn't think that was good. I did the same thing with W's. I thought I was so cool. I tried to do this with W's. Nope, wrong. W's. I was like, they're W's, not double V's. My teacher didn't understand. I made many mistakes in learning the alphabet. I used my eraser a ton. I erased stuff. And I needed it. I needed that eraser. Because my mistakes kept popping up again and again and again. I think the same is true with fear. I think that the things we fear will pop up again and again and again. They will keep coming back to haunt us today and this week, but in your lifetime too. Your fears will not just disappear forever. We find new things to be afraid of. And each time that comes up, we need to remember what Jesus has done in the world. We need to remember God's power and God's goodness, because none of us can erase fear on our own. So here's what I want you to do next. You have a piece of paper with some of your fears written on them. Now I want you to pull out that eraser and do this. Pray over those fears. Take just a little bit of time right now to ask God to give you peace in the midst of the unknown. And as you talk with God, slowly erase those fears. And believe that as you erase those things, God can do the same. And maybe it'll be instantaneous and right now, and maybe it'll be a process, and maybe it'll be something that keeps cropping up again and again. But I invite you now to begin that process by just praying over some of those fears and erasing them. Take this next musical video to do that. And if you need more time, great. And if you don't need as much time, click ahead to the next video of me.